It is time for Table Talk this morning. We are happy to have our good friends from the Sutherland Institute joining us this morning. On the line, it's Sutherland Education Policy Fellow Cooke Fairbanks. She is going to recap their latest Defending Ideas podcast. They interviewed Utah State Superintendent of Public Instruction, Dr. Molly Hart. Christine, appreciate you taking time out of your schedule and joining us this morning.
Thank you so much for having me, Tanner. I appreciate it.
Let's go ahead and jump right into this. The first thing you guys were wanting to highlight and that you discussed, the partnership between parents and teachers and how important that is and how they can work as true partners. Give us a little bit of a recap there.
Sure. This is something that Sutherland Institute is really focused on, this idea of parent-teacher relationship or partnership. I think it comes down to both sides have a set of responsibility. So on the school side, we've been talking a lot about the need to have increased transparency and to create options. And that invites parents in to be partners. And on the parent side, they have not just rights and education to guide their children through learning, but a responsibility. So to have increased involvement, and hopefully that comes as a result of those transparency efforts and choice. We think that, this kind of paradigm or dynamic can really kind of cut against some of the distrust or fear, things that we've kind of seen over the past few years with schools. We know most families choose the public school system and it works for their kids, and so we want to build on that.
You've been talking about the words transparency, choice. What does that mean in practice for Utah parents?
Yeah, you have to know what you're choosing in order for something to be a real choice. So transparency helps with that. It could be transparency of what the school offers, if they have a specific focus or theme, transparency about safety even, or curriculum. An area of focus that we've been looking at is transparency of school data on things like open enrollment, which is the ability to transfer your kids so that parents can decide if they'd like to apply there, if there's enough space. And we see transparency kind of growing in general, right? So there's this big shift towards technology, online platforms like Canvas or PowerSchool or Destiny for libraries. And so it gives parents an opportunity to get a window in to what students are doing, and it gives this cross communication between parents and teachers. In the private school realm, there's all sorts of online platforms or websites where you can search schools near you. You can even read parent reviews. So it's kind of built into that culture a little bit. But transparency is key for all of it. There's just this extra high standard when it comes to a public institution, like a public school, because it uses tax dollars. And so that's what we're really kind of driving at there when we talk about public education and transparency and how that boosts choice for families.
You mentioned about open enrollment. You guys did an impact analysis that looked at Utah's open enrollment law. So why does that matter, and how is that currently working?
Yeah, open enrollment is one of the most basic and oldest forms of school choice or public school choice. Basically, transferring a student from one district public school to another. So we're not talking about charter schools. And this has been in Utah since 1990. So it's definitely been around for a while. And each year our law is ranked really high. But that's just based on what's in the statute. So that is good news. But we've done some reviews about how well districts are complying with certain parts of the laws, especially one part that says they have to be transparent about open enrollment data on their website. So they have to post this several different categories to kind of give parents, an understanding of what seats are available. But what we learned is that about half don't have anything posted, and only 27% have a full capacity report for the current year. So that's a problem. That's a big compliance issue. And there's also currently no state-level reporting requirements. So currently, you could go to the Utah State Board of Education website and look up all different types of data, so attendance and enrollment trends, but you couldn't find open enrollment data, and that's probably because there's nothing to capture if the districts aren't doing it. So we've also looked at things like the language that surrounds open enrollment. Could it be more parent-friendly? The upshot of the impact analysis is for the state to do an audit to see what's going on in each of these different categories and how can they make open enrollment more parent-friendly.
Looking at enrollment shifts, charter enrollment is rising while some school districts are shrinking. What do you think is driving that trend right now?
Yeah, This is a multi-year trend that we're seeing, both charter school enrollment rising and district school enrollment shrinking. So it's hard to narrow down to one cause. I think most of the data says that fertility and migration patterns play a role. Increased choice plays a role. We've also kind of wondered out loud whether this growing feeling that public schools don't work for many families comes from certain pieces not feeling parent-friendly, like we've discussed. So much in the news over the past years has kind of created this narrative, but we aim to alleviate that in one sense by making schools, kind of create an environment that invites parents in, instills faith and trust from them. So I think that, this is unique to Utah. This is a nationwide trend. And I think there's just a general culture of people thinking like, hey, I have options now, I can look elsewhere, and I think many are.
As far as state leadership goes, how can Utah's state-level leadership strengthen local control and parent choice in our kids' education?
Yeah, so there are a lot of new opportunities, or at least new discussions about state and local control in education, especially with the federal government trying to wind down the U.S. Department of Education and federal involvement. And we chatted about this in the podcast as well, and I've written about it. But I think now's the time for states to plan. Maybe not necessarily always act with policy making, but to create task forces to set aspirational goals for what the state wants out of education, and to do things like audits to assess what the state would do with funding changes. We've seen some of these funding hiccups come from the federal government even this year, and then local districts are trying to figure out what to do, or what the state would want to do with more leeway if they had block grants for certain funding, federal funding, make it more student specific, create micro grants that they could use in flexible ways. So I think the goal would be to make sure that the education system is especially tuned to flexibility for the family to find what works for the child. I think that's the goal in general, but I think a lot of states kind of could use the reminder that with this new space comes this new opportunity to make it really student-friendly.
Looking ahead, what would you say is the main takeaway for Utah families from this conversation about education choice and partnership?
One of the discussion questions from the podcast was, what is the purpose of public education? And I really liked the focus that it's a commitment to educating the public, broadly speaking, rather than any one particular system. So that focus opens itself up to choice, and it requires parent partnership. Parents have rights to guide their children's education, but they also have responsibilities that coincide with it. So we, hope that in our work to make it more transparent, or to increase knowledge about options, even within the public system, that we can actually achieve that goal, which is educating the public in the way that makes sense for them. So you can find the impact analysis at SutherlandInstitute.org. You can find the podcast with a full discussion between Nick Dunn, myself, and Dr. Molly Hart.
Well, Christine, we appreciate you joining us this morning, getting us all up to date on, this is a big deal. Kids or parents want the best for their kids, and that certainly starts with education. So appreciate all the good work you guys are doing to get that information out there, that data collected and then distributed over there at Sutherland Institute, and we look forward to chatting with you in the future.
Same. Thanks so much.
Once again, that is Sutherland Education Policy Fellow Christine Cooke Fairbanks talking about their latest Defending Ideas episode on that parent-teacher partnership and how we can continue to build on that.